So we're going to begin by some quick presentations of the work or highlights of the work that were done last semester in last year, and one lot of the work that was done in first semester. Unfortunately, the lead of one of those projects is currently still somewhere in the ocean in Queensland, which is diving on a research project related to the work that she did. So we're going to begin by Catherine Murphy and Ross Bruin from Monash University. So over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I'm going to very just quickly introduce what we did, and then we're going to show a video that the students put together of the outcomes of the semester, because we thought it was good to hear from their own voices about the work. So I'll just share the screen. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Yep, that's working. So just to start by introduction, the studio was entitled On Edge, Coastal Adaptation in Skeens Creek, Apollo Bay and Marengo. We had two different classes running. One was a Master of Architecture studio and one was a Master of Urban Planning and Design. And Ross Bruin, who's here, ran the Master of Architecture and I ran the Urban Planning one. And even though these two units actually ran as separate units in terms of their assessment and structure, the students came together on a frequent basis. They shared all the guest speakers, they shared the crit sessions, and they presented their work together at the end of the year. So we very much tried to sort of immerse the architecture and the urban planning issues together. And as I mentioned before, we're going to show you a quick video of the work that they produced from the studios. Just in terms of the setup, as many of you would know, there's just been a lot of erosion and inundation down in this part of the coast between Skeens Creek and Marengo, particularly in the town of Apollo Bay. And there's also been inundation of the road, which you can see on the bottom image there. So this is having the impact of things you already know about, the narrowing and removal of dunes and edges. It's happening quickly in large chunks, so it's not a kind of gradual erosion, which people tend to imagine as climate change is a sort of slow process. It's happening very quickly here, and it's threatening cultural heritage, amenity and infrastructure. Obviously, there's a big community response from this. Community is very aware of what's going on, and this is just an image of the community of Apollo Bay representing itself at the climate change rally. In response to this, the state government has now acted and has put in groins and seawalls in the area between Skeens Creek and Marengo, particularly in Apollo Bay, where there's 3 new very large groins being put in place, and they were finished just before this summer. So I guess almost in contrast to that approach, we thought looking at this area in a kind of longer term future scenario way, that we would make one sort of bold move or gesture that sort of changes the whole approach to how you might deal with rising sea levels in this area. And so that was to move the Great Ocean Road back. So we moved the Great Ocean Road, theoretically, of course, between Skeens Creek and Marengo. And the kinds of benefits that we saw from this were that this single action has multiple benefits, and it removes the need to continuously defend the Great Ocean Road. And in fact, we imagine that this will be something that will actually happen in the future. It also importantly frees up the foreshore for nature-based processes. And with the students, we put a great emphasis on that working with a dynamic environment and not just working with hard structures, but actually thinking about ways to deal with the way it will progress over time. And the other thing was that this area is in need of quite a lot of uplift in any case. There's a need for a lot of new amenity and infrastructure. And so we saw this as an opportunity to embrace that as well. Just quickly, the studios had a number of guest speakers come in, which ranged from local people, including the Great Ocean Road Coastal and Parks Authority. We had Libby Sampson come from there, as well as local organisations, local government, and some academics, including Chris, who came and spoke to the group. and some people who are doing some consulting work as well, including Claire Scott, who's currently doing the landscape value assessment. And as I said, we started the workshop with the idea of moving the Great Ocean Road, and we did that with Joseph Vass, who's a regional roads engineer, and he manages the Great Ocean Road and knows a lot about it. So we had a workshop with the students. So although it's not necessarily a completely feasible proposal, it is based in some degree of feasibility of where the road would actually sit. The urban planning students did some work to start, which was about some GIS mapping, looking at the conditions and as they might change over the next 50 years. And both the architecture and planning students did some very detailed local site analysis, looking at particular locations that would be affected, as well as opportunities and risks associated with those. So I'll just stop sharing and go to the video now. So this video, Chris, it runs for 8 minutes, so I hope that's not too long. Oh, wait, sorry.
Catherine, just one thing to add there, just for everyone, it's probably pointing out the obvious, but the students weren't able to actually go to the site, despite doing that rigorous site analysis. They weren't able to actually set foot in Apollo Bay, which was unfortunate. Given the circumstances. And
I'm glad you said that, Ross, and you'll notice that there's a couple of responses, particularly from students who were overseas, who just literally could not get into the scale or sort of imagine this site, which is completely fair enough. And those people had never even been to Australia. So it was, quite tough for some of the students, I think, to deal with that. Anyway, I'll play this video now for you.
Planning and design, and Master of Architecture studios began by considering the effects of climate change, specifically sea level rise and bushfires on the Victorian southern coastal townships of Skeens Creek, Apollo Bay, and Marengo. The studio started with the premise that given the already noticeable effects of climate change in these townships, the Great Ocean Road must be significantly modified and/or moved. By collaborating on developing an urban scale master plan for the stretch of the Great Ocean Road that travels between Skeens Creek and Marengo through Apollo Bay, the studios were able to remove the need for the townships to continuously defend the road, and it allows for nature-based processes to take place. The studio drew on expertise and local knowledge from planning and design director Claire Scott and transport coordination manager Joseph Vass. The Master of Architecture studio on Edge Public Space explored the foreshore space that had been the Great Ocean Road. With the old road still in place as an extension to the existing Great Ocean Walk, this opened up opportunities for new public realm facilities and improvements that would make the town sustainable and able to thrive into the future. The start of the semester began with research into the townships to better understand the problems and opportunities created by moving the Great Ocean Road and the resulting possible design solutions. Each design proposal includes a combination of themes, including coastal erosion, fire, wetlands, the housing crisis, and rezoning and tourism, along with the main studio theme of climate change.
This planning project studio, the Ecological City, explores the creation of ecologically sensitive urban environments. This semester, the studio explored adaptation strategies that address the predicted impacts of climate change in the coastal towns of Skeens Creek, Apollo Bay, and Marengo. In the first stage of the studio, we undertook background and site analysis that included a critical review of the historical and current conditions in the three towns in the context of a broader policy and literature. After that, each student developed their own urban planning and design proposal for an area in the three towns from concept to implementation, working in parallel with architecture students on their project designs for the same areas. The proposals involve a varying combination of themes, such as street activation and tourist and nature-based infrastructure provision, all of which provide different perspectives towards climate change adaptation.
Where the Great Ocean Road now turns away from the foreshore at a junction within the quiet town of Skeens Creek, opportunities to reimagine, repurpose, or regenerate place had become key thematics for each of these proposals. Beginning along the foreshore are two distinct projects that explore the reuse and removal of existing infrastructure. The first proposes an upgraded public amenity space that denotes Skeens Creek as a notable stopping point along the Great Ocean Walk, achieved through unique and engaging public spaces. The second project is a pedestrian bridge that will replace the now redundant 3-lane traffic bridge at the center of Skeens Creek. The bridge acts primarily as a functional piece of pedestrian infrastructure along the Great Ocean Walk, whilst creating a memorable piece of architecture to attract visitors on site. Extending along to the foreshore, the third project is a series of experiential moments along a new section of the Great Ocean Walk within Skeens Creek. Through a range of landscape architectural interventions, the project offers a new experience of what was once the Great Ocean Road, conscious in responding to the increasing risks of floods, inundation, and erosion. Lastly, by responding to climate change challenges in ways which create new natural environments without interrupting existing conditions, this project looks to revitalize the foreshore from Skeens Creek to Apollo Bay through the formalization of salty wetlands, revegetation, creating vegetated terraces, and through the use of permeable surfaces.
Moving the road bed between Skeens Creek and Apollo Bay provided new opportunities for projects to be situated along the old road, with a series of stops connecting each location to one another. This experience provides a destination for people who love the outdoors and appreciate the importance of natural landscapes, connecting both visitors and locals to celebrate the sensitive wetlands. The first design provides new infrastructure and amenities drawing people into the Wild Dog Creek area, a space that will be missed by moving the road. Along the series of stops, there's also a new visitors centre, restoring the lost connection of the Apollo Bay Museum, the unique ecology of the Wild Dog Creek, and the implications of climate change. Lastly, the Wild Dog Creek Nature Reserve will restore coastal dunes and vegetation by creating additional roads, vegetation cover, dune restoration, and educational landscapes. A range of compatible recreational activities will also be provided.
With a combination of reimagined housing schemes, the formation of the Great Ocean Promenade, and upgrades to current infrastructure, the proposed Apollo Bay will strengthen the township standing as a major destination along the Great Ocean Road. With the induced dangers of flooding into the town, this project demonstrates a strategy for how a residential block can be transformed for coexistence with tidal inundation, whilst maintaining the identity of Apollo Bay's coastal township. By implementing a pedestrian program and more permeable surfaces, the project strengthens suburbia for a sustainable future. Similarly, this proposal interrogates the viability of the homes along the highly vulnerable beachfront, whilst also looking at the reduced vehicular accessibility of houses along the foreshore. By addressing the local residential and tourist housing crisis and designing a public pavilion, the project supports Apollo Bay as both a feasible residential town and tourist destination despite ongoing climate change. Through the proposition of an Apollo Bay bus interchange, a northern gateway and arrival point will welcome large numbers of tourists to this major destination. Located opposite an existing petrol station, the project is designed to accommodate busloads of tourists whilst providing public amenities to all those that live in and visit Apollo Bay. With the move of the road, both protection of current residents and providing amenity along the new road is vital. Through the densification of the large nature strips along Pascoe Street with planting, reduced visual and audio pollution from the road will impact the residents. Through centralising car parks from the beachfront to available land, greater accessibility to the new Great Ocean Road Promenade will aid the tourist experience of Apollo Bay. Through the critique of the current expansion master plan for the Apollo Bay Harbour, this project reveals underlying issues with fishermen's cooperative coastal infrastructure. As an adaptation of this master plan, the project uses heritage conservation as an avenue to aid social, economic, and environmental resilience in the town. With a similar premise, the Apollo Bay Harbour Adaptation Plan aims to respond to climate change impacts through transitioning the harbour's land uses as sea level rises. New developments will provide the fishing industry with more economic opportunity whilst giving visitors a unique experience of the harbour's historic and cultural characteristics. On the southern end of Apollo Bay, the new urban gateway aims to reconnect tourists and residents to the cultural and heritage significance of the Great Ocean Road. Through the adaptation of the existing war memorial and introduction of a series of new public spaces, the project allows for both the greeting to Apollo Bay and forms a repurposed look for the monument that communicates a range of site histories. Also exploring tourism, this project addresses the need for growing tourists and car parks. Approximately 178 car parking spaces on the foreshore will be moved following the move of the Great Ocean Road. In addition, to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, the electric car and charging stations will improve the sustainable development of car infrastructure through solar panel systems. The Apollo Bay panorama has the potential to be a refuge for commercial outlets that will need to relocate to better reflect the changing economic and physical environment of Apollo Bay. The project is far removed from the Apollo Bay foreshore and is therefore separated from the effects of the rerouting of the Great Ocean Road, erosion, and sea level rise, and the accompanying economic and social effects.
Lifting the road between Apollo Bay and Marengo will accommodate for future flooding across the backwater and create new opportunities for public space on, under, and around the new proposed bridge. In this urban design project, the existing wetland at Barham River will be expanded to uplift the caravan park and reserve as a retreat and adaptation strategy. Similarly, this next project proposes an amphibious design that will monitor, address, and manage issues of flood patterns and increased nutrient loads in waterways to maintain the natural cycle of the floodplain. The first of two bridge proposals, this project explores an elevated road structure that will provide a new type of farming, agroecology, for a sustainable and long-term solution for food production and organic waste recycling. The second bridge proposal offers a megastructure solution to address the housing crisis in the area by combining the two elements to create an economic level between the road and units that is easily modifiable. The tidal walk interrogates the ground level of the existing road and reimagines it as a new landscape for people and ecosystems to interact with, highlighting the effects of climate change by immersing users into an ever-changing floodplain and oceanfront condition. Lastly, in Marengo, a series of structures will be deployed to protect the coastal edge from erosion and inundation, whilst proposing new public amenities to existing areas to develop the foreshore.
There were additional proposals developed in studios that investigate broader thematics that traverse wider scales. The area observed in the studio is particularly susceptible to the threats of bushfires, and therefore this project proposes revegetating local streets within Victorian, fire-resisting and redundant flora in a density that is proportionate to landscape, anticipated traffic level and proximity to bushfire-prone areas. This project addresses similar ideas of bushfire mitigation, but utilises architecture as a tool to foster dialogue around bushfires and other climate-related hazards to increase preparedness and fortify disaster resilience. The project responds to the urgent need to support the communities of Skeens Creek, Marengo, Apollo Bay in their disaster awareness and mitigation approaches by providing educational public spaces that double as evacuation points in a likely emergency scenario. With similar ideas on community-led resilience, the final project is a climate retreat strategy that focuses on the area of the former Great Ocean Road with an emphasis on the community developing a respectful relationship with a dynamic and evolving coastline. The proposal is regulatory-based and calls for the induction of rolling development restrictions based on sea level rise and wider ranging requirements for permeability, site coverage and vegetation to manage the risk of inundation. Together, these studios speculate upon what is required to create a resilient and sustainable built environment on a coastal edge threatened by shifting climate conditions. The premise of moving the Great Ocean Road underscores the need to significantly rethink the future of local townships and the subsequent opportunities for public projects that can enhance the local identity of the region and its history, ensure a viable future for residents and visitors, and preserve and regenerate the natural landscape. Thank you.
Okay, so that's it, I guess.
So we've allowed sort of 3 or 4 minutes for questions, and we can come back to more of that at the end of the other presentations. Questions from anybody online or in person to Catherine and Ross?
Was there an opportunity for discussion between the groups about the interrelationship between the potential different interventions? As the studios, as the individual groups were developing up their situated responses to the different sites, was there a kind of a feedback or a process that would allow interaction between the groups?
I think just to jump in with the architecture students, Michael, we very much curated the project so we didn't have too many overlaps, so that we had students working at each sort of part of the Great Ocean Road along that length in the different townships. And then across the groups with the planning students, there was some discussion about how the planning projects could sort of provide the kind of framework or the thinking behind how one of the architecture projects might be sort of done, I suppose. So that discussion was had and sort of curated to a certain extent.
Yeah. And we also matched them up, like we brought them together to present together in their areas, both the planning and the architecture students. But I think because we couldn't actually be in person, it really limited that opportunity, and we never got there as well, obviously. So like the whole Zoom environment made those kinds of opportunities much lesser than they would have been normally.
Because it's sort of, there's some interesting strategies there, and you can see that some might be interestingly explored and experimented with or extrapolated across different parts of the bigger site. But yeah, as you say, within the realm of the constraints of communication, that's a wish.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the one there was kind of one studio project, or one project that actually kind of traversed both groups, which was this idea of making a kind of coastal walk where the old Great Ocean Road was. So many of the projects touched on that, and then a whole bunch, sort of drifted off. But if we were then to put forward a single project that the studio undertook, that was it, really.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you? So in terms of 2022, I guess the question is, are those students now completed and disappeared, or are they continuing this year to develop those projects, or would it be another batch of students that would be responding to different provocations or situations, or what's, I guess this would be a question for all of the things we look at today from me, but I guess where does it sit, the evidence that's kind of been gathered so far, or the projects been gathered, do they then get built on this year, or do you start again with another batch of students? I guess is my question.
We've got, with the architecture group, they were a mix of 4th and 5th years. So the 5th years have since moved on. There's some 4th years now coming through. Likewise with the planning, Catherine, is that right? That they were graduating students, some of them?
No, actually, they were all first year of the program. Yeah.
But we don't actually have any plans at the moment to undertake a follow-up studio as such. But obviously keen to sort of listen in and hear what others are doing. Very interested in the idea of exhibiting the work. And I know that's sort of on the agenda to discuss today as well.
Yeah. And also, just to say, we did present it at the State of Australian Cities Conference in December last year as well. So, people were very interested in working with students in this way on sort of real world problems of this kind.
I was about to remark that clearly there is so much more than that quick video was able to show. And that the issue of exhibiting this work is really important. And I wondered whether any of this work has been shown to any of the people in those townships yet.
No, so when we previously did another studio down there, we had a community exhibition at the golf course down there at Apollo Bay. But this time, again, because of COVID, we couldn't really do anything. And also Monash has introduced some quite stringent recent rules around showing student work. We have to get their permission after assessment. So it's sort of, that has put a bit of a spanner in the works about representing it, but we now have that permission from the students.
Yes, I was going to say that is the reason that so far we can't point people to the website yet to look at this work, but we must come back to the issue of exhibiting work, I think. But if it's all right just to leave that holding there, then we